I hope I'm not spoiling this book that came out 7 years ago. Hey guys, it's Michaela back again with another video. I am coming at you again, same clothes, same thought, same day, because I'm not putting a bra on twice. I, approximately 60 seconds ago, finished reading Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I'm always here for the most timely book reviews. This book came out in 2013. I didn't hear about it until the movie came out, probably like, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe 3. I didn't see the movie either. I feel like I had plans to see Crazy Rich Asians, and something happened to those plans, and then I never got to see it. But I don't remember because I don't remember anything. But like I said, I literally just finished this book, but I already knew I was going to make this video because I have lots of thoughts about this book, but I wanted to make sure I finished it just in case any of those thoughts were changed by the ending. They were not, so I'm just going to continue with exactly what I was going to rant at you before. So I want to start by saying that I didn't think this was a bad book. In fact, I'm going to give it 3 stars, but it's kind of a disappointing 3. For a good portion of this book, like, I thought it was going to be a 4-star book, and then just over time, like, sort of the more I thought about it, the more not pleased I was with the book. I read this book in a couple of like really big chunks because one thing that is absolutely true about this book is that it's incredibly bingeable. It is a very easy read. It is an incredibly just like, you can just sit down and just like get lost in this world of luxury and excess, and like it's not hard at all. I should say what this book is about. This book is about Rachel Chu and Nick Young, who are professors in America. She was born in China but was raised in America almost her entire life, he is from Singapore, but he like went to school in England and then now teaches in New York, and they've been dating for a while, and he is going to be the best man at his best friend's wedding in Singapore, so the two of them go together to go to this wedding, and that's when Rachel finds out that he's massively fucking loaded. His family is like basically as close to Singaporean royalty as there is, just like the most obscene, disgusting amounts of wealth. But the thing is, that's not what this book is about, because this book basically is not about Rachel and Nick at all, which would be fine, except for the fact that it also is about Rachel and Nick. So I'm very briefly gonna go over the things that I liked about this, before getting more deep into the things I didn't really like about it. So, things I liked about it. 1, I really liked all of the secondary and tertiary characters. Not necessarily liked them as in I would want to hang out with them, but I thought they were very well written. I thought they were super interesting and very like different from each other, but very clearly like part of the same world. Like I believed that all of them knew each other, even though they were like pretty different and like valued money in different ways and for different reasons. You know, they were just like really fun to like step into their shoes. Probably my favorite character was Astrid, who is Nick's cousin. She was really interesting. So she sort of straddled this line between like very clearly like just super into like the haute couture, could drop millions of dollars on clothes at like a moment's notice, but like kind of also down to earth. Like she was privileged enough to not have to think about money, but like also wasn't obsessed with money like the way that some of her other family members were. And then her plot line was also interesting. The second thing I loved is sort of the tour of Singapore that we got to go on. You know, this reminded me a lot of Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Adib Khorram, in that both of these books, just the food descriptions were so great. I wanted to try every single dish described in here. Super loved it. And even outside the food, just sort of the descriptions of these buildings and these sort of the societal stratification. Even though I can't even begin to fathom the wealth that was being described here. Again, like I said, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't even have that image to go off of. I can't imagine that kind of wealth, but like I felt that it was very real. So I like that. This book also made fun use of footnotes. You know, there was lots of words and phrases and like exclamations from various languages and dialects of the region, and so we were provided with those definitions. A lot of times they also came associated with sort of like the historical reason, like why, you know, they might use this turn of phrase instead of that other turn of phrase. And that was really interesting. There was just generally history lessons in there for abbreviations and whatnot, and that I really just always appreciate it. I always appreciate when the book can entertain me and educate me. I think that's really great. If I could just make like one sort of critique of the footnotes, it was that there were definitely times when I feel like maybe the reader didn't have to have, like, I didn't want my hand held quite as much. So like one example, when they first arrive in Singapore, Rachel and Nick, they meet Nick's best friend and his fiance, and they go out to eat, or in the airport, Colin, the best friend, says, do you want to go to your hotel, or do you want to, I think the word is Makan, I can't remember, but do you want to, there's a word. And then I missed the asterisk. There was an asterisk to translate the word, which like I said, I think was Makan. But in the next sentence, Nick says, yeah, I could eat. So I didn't even need the footnote, right? Like, I just, through context clues, understood that the word Makan meant eat, right? And it wasn't until I actually read down further that I realized that it had been translated for me, but I didn't need the translation because I got it through context clues. I wanted a little bit more of that. I could probably count on one hand with fingers left to spare how many times the reader was left to figure out what an italicized portion meant by context clues, and I just wanted more of that. I think there was space for it. Not all the time. Like, there are times when, like, you know, someone just like swears at somebody. I'm like, I don't know what this swear means. Yeah, there was definitely opportunity to use context clues to define some of these words and phrases, and I would have just appreciated more of that. I don't think the footnotes needed to be relied on so much. But that being said, I really actually did like the footnotes. I always enjoy them, so that was great. I really enjoyed how bingeable this book is. Like I said, I could just like sit down and read this for like literally hours. I would say this is a good like beach/travel read when you're just looking to like sort of pick something up. It's something that you can either like rip through very quickly or take your time on. It's good for both. It's about 530 pages, which I wouldn't guess by looking at it, but the pages are a little thin, which was whatever. So I liked how I was able to get through it quickly, but I also felt like I was enjoying it as I was reading it. But now I want to get into what I think is the sort of like the biggest flaw of this book, and that is that Nick and Rachel aren't really the protagonists of this story, and also they shouldn't be, because they're so fucking boring. Like, we have such interesting characters in this book. You know, we've got Nick's mother, who's like totally insane but like dedicated to her family, and then we've got like Astrid, who is again like dedicated to her family but like also like incredibly dedicated to her marriage, and like knows what she wants out of life, like knows what her priorities are, and like has to have this sort of awakening that her priorities and her husband's don't match. Then we've got the character of Eddie, who's a total sociopath. Like, what an insane character. Like, never met a character I've hated so much, but like so much fun to read. Nick's grandmother, again, really complex, sort of like doesn't quite have a personality twist, but like did not see, like, her character developed in very interesting and unique ways. Nick and Rachel have no personalities. I don't know them. Like I said, just finished this book. I can't tell you anything about them as people. They are professors, and that's it. At one point, Nick is defending Rachel to his mother and explaining why he wants to marry her and why he loves her, and the things that he says are, she is smart and a good person. Sir, do you even know this woman? I have no reason to believe that they know each other. Like, there's no real familiarity at the very beginning, and then again at the very end. We do get some like sort of bantery type language that like sort of suggests that they're familiar with each other, and like we know that they live together and they have been together for 2 years, but like they're almost never together in this book. Pretty early on, you know, they get to Singapore, and almost right away, Nick has to go to the bachelor party and Rachel's been invited to the bachelorette party. So they're on 2 separate trips, and they don't come back together in a meaningful way for like hundreds of pages. And like this is the central couple. Like, I get that we're bouncing around and we're like in other marriages and other family situations. Like, I know that they're not the sole focus of the book, but they're on the cover. They're obviously the focus of the book. The back of the book only talks about the 2 of them. So they are supposed to be our like main couple. And I don't know anything about them. I don't know anything about their relationship. I don't know that they know each other. And I'm supposed to believe that they want to get married. And I'm like, why? why do you want to get married? Like, what do you like about each other? All that we know is that he's hot and she didn't know he was rich, so she's not a gold digger, which I'll get to that in a second. And then she's smart. She's like, she has a PhD in economics, which is cool. Like, I like that, but that's not a personality. Being a professor, being smart is not a personality. Like, for a book that is so rich in just like wild, eccentric characters, we have the two most boring, they're not even boring, they're just empty. Like, they could be anybody, and I don't know who they are. I hope I'm not spoiling this book that came out 7 years ago, but they have this like big fight and like breakup or whatever. And I'm like, am I supposed to root for them to get back together? I'm like, I don't know them. I don't know anything about them. I don't care enough about them to want them to be happy, separate or together. I don't know them. They are strangers to me, and as far as I can tell, strangers to each other. I'm sure that in the movie, like, the actors bring more to the table than was given to them in this book, because there was, I can't imagine what you would have to go on if I were an actor, which I am not, but if I were an actor and they were like, oh, you're playing the protagonist, Rachel Chu, of this book, because who Constance Wu plays her, right? Like, I can't imagine Constance Wu like getting this book and being like, oh, cool, I don't know fucking anything about my character, because she doesn't have a personality, and now there's Nick, and because she doesn't have a personality, she doesn't say a word when this guy she's like living with and very deeply in love with just sort of like leaves her to figure out that he is richer than God. This is insane. Like, I think she knows he's like well off. Like, he wears like nice suits and went to Oxford and shit. So it's not like she's been operating under the delusion that he's poor, right? But he also knows where she comes from. You know, he knows that she is from a single parent household and that her mother had to like work her entire life, so it's like working class. He's aware of where she comes from and like the very, very different socioeconomic places that they are coming from in this relationship. And he says nary a word to prepare her for what she's about to walk into. He invites her to Singapore and she's like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll meet your family, that's cool. And so they take this like expensive ass plane, like one of those like planes where like you get a whole cabin with like fancy TVs and shit. And she's like, okay, this is weird, but like, I guess he's like splurging or whatever. But then they get to Singapore and like on day 2, I think it's like day 2, they're going to meet his grandmother at the house that he grew up in. But he had to go do best man stuff during the day, and she was with a friend of hers from college, so he calls her and he's like, hey, can you meet me at the grandmother's house? Like, traffic is gonna be a bitch, I'm not gonna be able to come pick you up and get you there. And she's like, sure, we'll meet you there. And so he leaves her to by herself roll up to what essentially is the Downton Abbey house, and it's just like nothing. And so she has to drive up to this house with like armed guards. I'm so angry at him. To drive up to this house with armed guards, and she has about 30 seconds to process the level of wealth and privilege that she's dealing with before walking inside and meeting her family. First of all, she was not adequately packed for the situation. She's a professor, like an adjunct professor. She doesn't have the wardrobe appropriate for this. So, or if she did, she probably didn't pack it. So like, she's not appropriately dressed, which is not her fault. Or like, maybe I would have broken up with this man on the spot. To put me in this situation is so horrific. I'm so stressed thinking about it. I can't imagine being put in this situation. Later on, when she finally does explode at him for not preparing her, which it took her 430 pages. 430 pages for her to finally say, hey, asswipe, why didn't you tell me about this? And his excuse was, oh, well, we're very private, we don't talk about money. So it's like, so you come from a culture where like talking about money and money in general is like this very sensitive, like it is understood to be like a thing. It's not just like, oh, I never thought money was that important. No, like you come from a place where you know that money is important and you know that money and status mean something. So you knew it was important to tell her because you know what's important, and you just like didn't. I can't imagine that. Like, I get that it's a weird thing to bring up, right? And like, obviously I understand him maybe not wanting to tell her right away because like you don't know if the person you're dating is going to like hear how rich you are and suddenly see you as like fucking old Mr. Moneybags and not like who you really are. Like that's valid. But like you're thinking about marrying this chick. So like if you're that far in, like, you know, at this point, like, you know what her values are, like, you know who she is. Presumably, again, they're both cardboard cutouts and not real people, so maybe he doesn't know. But to not tell her, and then she's just silent about it. She's like inside freaking out, valid, but then like doesn't say anything. And then like immediately after this dinner at this like palace, gets thrust off onto a bachelorette party on a private island, and where she's like fucking harassed by the other bridesmaids and just stays quiet about it all. And I'm just like, I would have been on that fucking phone so fast. I would have been like, I'm going to be back in New York in 24 hours or I'm going to murder you. Like, I don't, and it took, like I said, 430 pages for her to finally say, why didn't you prep me for this? And I'm like, why are you just having this conversation now? Oh, maybe it's because you don't spend the book together at all and you're supposed to be on this vacation and you guys barely spend any time together because you're not a real couple, because you're not a real people. This relationship sucks. Every other like character is super interesting. Like the whole thing with Astrid and her husband, a little weird. I didn't like the space it ended up in. I like basically liked it right up until the end. Like, let's just talk about how interesting Astrid's relationship or like just plotline was, because I didn't really like how it ended, but you can't deny that it was like fucking interesting. So spoilers for all of Astrid's plotline, I guess. So she thinks her husband is cheating on her. So she does a little bit of evidence collecting and then eventually confronts him, and he's like, yep, I've been cheating on you. I guess I should go. And she's like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, I wasn't telling you to go. Like, I'm willing to work on this. He's like, nope, I need to go. And she's like, what the fuck? So, this like asshole like decides to like dip on her and like disappear from like the most important social events of their lives, basically. And so like she has to start scrambling for excuses for him, this shitty thing that he did. And you know, through the wedding and stuff, she starts growing closer to like her ex-boyfriend that she was in love with when she was a teenager. And so like it's definitely like heavily hinted that they're gonna get back together, but then he helps her sort of like find out where he's living in Hong Kong with his mistress and like maybe the child that they have together. And so he goes and confronts, or she goes and confronts him, and it turns out he's not cheating on her and he doesn't have this secret child, but he just wanted out of the relationship, and so like made up this cheating thing to make it easier for her to divorce him. And it's just like, or you could have just had like a fucking conversation. Like, why are the men in this book, like, listen, the women in this book suck. Everyone in this book sucks. Except like Astrid and then Peaklin, Rachel's best friend. Pretty much everyone sucks. But the men are just the worst. Like, have a fucking conversation. For once in your fucking life, have a conversation. If someone fabricated an affair to get out of a relationship instead of just telling me I would like out of this relationship, I would murder that person. And this book gave me very murdery feelings, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. But like, I don't think you can call this a romance, because the two main characters who are lovey-dovey on the cover don't even fucking know each other. And I'm not even gonna get into the whole thing with Rachel and her mother and her father, because that was just so wild. Because, okay, another complaint I have about this book, I'm like talking myself into it too, and I really want to get this a 3. I need to like chill out. But all of the interesting shit happens in the last 130 to 150 pages. Like, there's like sort of surface level interesting stuff, like interesting characters and interesting like tours of, you know, Singapore and China and Malaysia and stuff like that. Like, we get to like learn more about this like sort of corner of the world that like at least I, as a white American reader, am not familiar with and have never really been introduced to before. I really enjoyed that, but that wasn't a book, right? That was like meeting cool people and seeing cool places, right? Like, that's not a novel, that's like a tour blog. The actual like plot of this book doesn't start until the wedding, which is insanely late into the book, way past the halfway point. Like, you could kind of cut out the first half of this book and you'd be fine. The most interesting plot thing that happens in this book is Rachel finding out the truth about her father and her past and like where her family comes from in China. And when I say this is the last like 50 pages, it is shoved in at the end so last minute. We first get teased about something's happening, like there are secrets to be had around 150 to 200 pages in. But I'm like, I'm sorry, the crux of this book is absolutely what the fuck is going on with Rachel's family. And it's like, oh, it's like thrown in at the end, like, oh yes, and also your father is not who you think he is. What? Like, I get that there are sequels, but like, can we focus on the interesting stuff? If I could rewrite this book, Astrid would be the main character. Rachel and Nick would be like backside, like that plot line would be like one of the several B-C plots, not the A plot. Like Astrid would be the A plot because she's by far the most interesting character and her plot is the most interesting. Will I be reading the future books? If they are given to me for free, as this one was, quite possibly. Will I be paying for the sequels? Again, if they're like at Goodwill or something, I might pick it up, but I'm not rushing out to Amazon to pick up the next one. I don't know if any of what just happened made sense. I don't know if there was logical through lines happening. My final thoughts on this book are, it's not a bad book. It is a fun read. I definitely had a hard time putting it down, so that's why I think ultimately it's a 3 and not a 2, because I think if it was a 2, I would not have wanted to read it, and I did want to read this. But it was just like, ultimately, like, it was kind of disappointing. The main relationship sucked because the characters sucked, not because they were bad people, but because they were boring, empty people. And the plot was so all over the place, and like nothing of import or consequence happened until at least the last half. And like the stakes of the last half were so much higher than the stakes of the first half, because the first half I was actually really enjoying myself and I thought I was going to be a light romp through Singapore, and then like shit gets like actually serious in the second half, and I'm like, the first half did not prep me for this. I would have, if the whole book was like this, the second half, I could have lived with it, or if the whole book was like the first half, I could have lived with it. But because the two halves were so different, I was like exhausted by the end of this. But I did have fun. It may not sound like it, but I did have fun, and I'm glad I read it. But yeah, I was so angry at Nick as I was reading this. I'm like, how fucking dare you not prepare her for this life? That's my ultimate takeaway is, guys, if you, and no, I'm sorry, there's like any person, if you are in a relationship and you come from a background that is in some way abnormal, imagine, if you will, instead of coming from an insanely rich family, Nick's family was of the traveling circus. And, you know, he wasn't in the traveling circus, right? Like, he went to college and is now a professor, but he is in love with this girl who does not know anything about the traveling circus. And he knows she doesn't know anything about the traveling circus. Imagine if him saying like, oh honey, would you like to come meet my family? And she says, yes, of course. And so they get in the car and they drive to the airport and they get on the plane and they fly out to the middle of nowhere. And now, during this whole trip, he has an opportunity to tell her what's coming, and he doesn't. And it isn't until she walks up to this fairground in the middle of fucking like nowhere, Nebraska, and sees the tent, and that is when she first learns that he is from a traveling circus, and she just has to process that on the spot and deal with it. Like, no, if you come from a weird background or have like a weird out of the blue thing in your life, that's fine. It's fine to come from where you come from. It's fine to be who you are. It's fine to like be a little weird about it, be a little self-conscious about it, like not know how to talk about it. Like, yeah, everyone's got family shit. But you don't thrust your girlfriend into it by showing her the big tent and forcing her to get on board. Like, what the fuck is wrong with men? I'm tired, guys. I'm so tired. This book came out 7 years ago. I could not be more late to the game. This did make me excited to watch the movie. I do plan, I don't know if it's on Hulu or if I can get it on a streaming service that I have access to, but I hope it is, because I do want to see it. I want to see the opulence. I think I have to be done yelling about this now, because I'm hungry and I'm sleepy. So, thanks for watching whatever the fuck this was. Feel free to check out my other videos if you are so inclined, or like, I don't know, text a friend and say hi, or do that, whichever. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.